It's homework time! Homework time! Lesson 7 of Module 1. Here's our homework. Let's start by writing our name up top. Always good habit. Take the time to do that first. I'll write my name. You write yours. And jot down today's date. You write the actual date where you are and when you are. I'm going to write today because it is. Don't write that. Okay, our instructions for number 1. Round to the nearest 1,000. Use the number line to model your thinking. Okay, so I love this mathematical symbol here, the wavy equals sign, which means it's about equal to. So 5,900 is about equal to, and that's what we're here to figure out. So you simply look, we're rounding to the nearest 1,000. You got to pay attention to that in the instructions. Very important. What place are we rounding to? And so when we look in the thousands place, we have a 5. And so that, when we're using this vertical number line to do our rounding, that is what we write down here, is the digit or the value of the digit in the place we're rounding to. So we're rounding to the nearest 1,000, it's 5,000. Then you simply ask, well, because we're dealing with thousands, what's 1,000 more? If we were dealing with hundreds, you'd say, what's 100 more? But in this case, we're dealing with thousands, so what's 1,000 more? What's the next 1,000? Skip counting by thousands, and that's right, it's 6,000. And then we place a midpoint. What's in the middle of 5,000 and 6,000? Now this can be tricky, okay? So what you do is you go to the next place, and you say, well, the midpoint between thousands is 500. So 5,000, 6,000, the midpoint is 5,500. That's what's in the middle. This is a place where it can be easy to make errors and say, right, 6,500, or maybe even something a little more outlandish like 55,000 or something. But when you look at it, here's what you do. You always ask, does my answer make sense? Does that midpoint make sense? If I were skip counting now by half a thousands to find a midpoint, 5,000, 5,500, 6,000, and if I were to continue, 6,500, 7,000, 7,500. Yes, so that makes sense as a midpoint. And you'd also kind of step back and look at it. Is that in the middle between 5,000 and 6,000? Well, if we were to go by hundreds, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, there's our middle, 600, 700, 800, 900, 6,000. So it is our midpoint. You have to make sure that midpoint's correct or the whole thing falls to shambles. So 5,900, we're asking ourselves, is it between the 5,500 and the 5,000? Is it in this range? Or is it between 5,500 and 6,000? Is it in this range? Or I should say, or equal to 5,500, but we'll get to that later, I'm sure. And so when we think about it, 5,900 is closer to 6,000. And when I write it on here, as you should do, you can easily see, yeah, that makes sense. 5,000, 5,500, 5,600, 700, 800, 5,900, 6,000. Skip counting by hundreds there. Okay, so we took our time with that first one. So 5,900 is about equal to, rounds to the nearest 1,000 at 6,000. We won't take quite as much time on the rest of them. Now again here, although we have digits this time in the hundreds and tens place, we're still rounding to the nearest 1,000. And what do we have there? 4,000. So that is the lower point of our vertical number line, 4,000. What's 1,000 more? 5,000, you got it. And now again, what's the midpoint between 4,000 and 5,000? Again, think of that 500 because we're talking about thousands. That's half a thousand. 4,500 is our midpoint. Now when you go to place 4,180 on this vertical number line, you can see probably pretty quickly that it falls around about here down towards 4,000. 4,180 would come about here. See 4, 0, 4, 1, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5. You see how this works? Just like counting. So to the nearest thousand, what thousand is it nearest? It's nearest to 4,000. Okay, you got the hang of it. You see we have to do C through F. We'll do all that next and watch how quickly it goes. All right, so now you'll see how it works a little differently in items C through F. We're still rounding to the nearest thousand, so you still look in the thousands place. And you see we have how many thousands? 32,000. You see why we had questions like that on previous lessons. So we have 32,000. That's our lower point on this vertical line. What's the next, careful, thousand after 32,000? 33,000. If you said 40,000, you went to the next 10,000. But the question was, what is the next thousand after 32,000? What's 1,000 more? Didn't we have lots of questions like that? You see why we did all that stuff before. Now you can round like a pro. So 33,000, skip counting by thousands, comes after 32,000. Now the midpoint, again, we're still looking at the nearest thousand, so our midpoint, half a thousand, is 500, right? So we're looking at 32,500, we could say. 32,500 is our midpoint. Now when we go to place this number on our vertical number line, we're going to look at this hundreds place here where we have an 8. And is that above 5 or below 5? Well, obviously 8's more than 5, you know that. And so our number that we're rounding is going to come in up here, 32,879 is closer to, yes, you see, 33,000. Boy, are you getting the hang of this. You'll see it's like anything else, a little difficult at first. You start to get the hang of it, you do it enough, it comes to you very quickly and easily. Again, the nearest thousand. What's our thousand? How many thousands do we have? We have 78 thousands. 78 thousands. Now again, skip counting by thousands. Or if I were to ask you what's 1,000 more than 78,000, you'd say 79 thousands. If you said 80, you went to the next 10,000. Now, what's our midpoint? Again, half a thousand is 500. So between 78 and 79 would be 78 and a half, or 78,500 would be our midpoint. 78,500. And we go to place our number. Again, we're looking here in the hundreds place to determine if it comes above or below that midpoint, or equal to it, I should add. And we see, hey, 6 is more than 5, right? So it comes above the midpoint. So 78,600 comes above our midpoint. Therefore, it's closer to, you got it. And that's where we'd round it to, 79,000. Of course, look at it now and ask, does this answer make sense? 78,600 is about equal to 79,000? Yeah, that makes sense. It does. Now here, in these two, with E and F, we're going out to the hundred thousands place, but that doesn't change our process here. We're still looking at the thousands place. You see we have a 1 here in the thousands place. So how many thousands do we have? We have 251 thousands. That's how many thousands. We're rounding to the thousands place. There are 251 thousands. Skip counting in the thousands place. What would come next? What is 1,000 more than 251 thousands? Yes, indeedy do. It is 250 2,000. And still our midpoint, half a thousand, is 500. So it doesn't matter that the numbers are getting bigger. It's still half a thousand is 500. So it's 251,500 is our midpoint. If you look at it, that makes sense. 251, 251 and a half, 252, it makes sense. So now to place our number here, we look over in the hundreds place and we see a 0. And so now we know this is just barely over our 251,000. We can go out to the tens place and say, you know, it's 3 tens above that. So 251,031 is down here. You see why? Yeah, it's just 31 more than this. And that whole range of 1,000 here is just 31 more than the lower point on our vertical number line. So what is it closer to? What does this round to? Was it about equal to? Yes, it's closer to that number, 251,000. Now, same thing here, but there's a little twist on this one. You will see, look in the thousands place. Okay, no problemo. We got a 9 there. So how many thousands in this number? There are 699 thousands. That's how many thousands there are. There are 699 thousands in this number. And now the little twist here is when you say, okay, what's 1,000 more? Well, if you were counting 697, 698, 699, 700,000. And now, if that seems at all strange to you, just look at it in that way. Like I just said, 699, what comes next when you're counting? 700. And still, because we're rounding to the nearest thousand, half a thousand is still 500. So our midpoint is still going to be based on that 500. So 699 thousandths and a half, and 500. 699,500 is our midpoint. And now, rounding this number, same thing we do on the other ones there. We look in the hundreds place, we say 900, what is that closer to? Is it above or below this midpoint? Clearly far above it, right? It's practically up at the 700,000, so here's where it goes. 699,900, and then the actual rounding is simple, right? Which thousand is it closer to? It is closer to, yes, 700,000. You are a rounding pro. Look at you go. All right, so that's number 1, A, B, C, D, E, and F, done. Let's go on to number 2. And number 2 takes us to our old favorite, these word problems that are the way we really deal with life of math most often. So we have Stephen. What's up, Stephen? Put together 981 pieces of a puzzle. About how many pieces did he put together is our question. Round to the nearest thousand. Well, that's good. They give us specific instructions here of how to round. Use what you know about place value to explain your answer. So we have to answer the question about how many pieces. How do we do that? By rounding to the nearest thousand. And then we have a second part where we need to explain our answer. So if you just write a number here, you did half of it, or not even, you did a third of it, because we need to see the rounding as well. So let's actually go ahead and draw our happy little vertical number line, because this is a very good illustrative example. Because when we look at this number 981, I'll write it out here again a little bigger so we can see. We're rounding to the nearest thousand. Well, what's in the thousands place? Nothing. There's nothing there. So how many thousands are there? There are 0 thousands. So that is our baseline. 0. Interesting, huh? So what's 1,000 more? Because we're rounding to the nearest thousand. That's why I ask what's 1,000 more. It's 1,000. Okay. Things are shaping up now. What's our midpoint? Well, we just did 6 examples like this, right? You know what the midpoint is. It's 500. There you go. 500 is half 1,000. Where does, I'll put a little circle around this, 981. Where does 981 fall on this number line? Well, it's definitely more than 500, right? It's practically 1,000. It's how many away? It's 19 away from 1,000. On the scale of 1,000, it's way up here. I'll just turn this into an arrow pointing to it. That's where our 981 goes. So now we can write our little sentence like we had before with, I love doing our little wavy equal sign, which means about equal to or is rounded to. It will round to what? That's right, the nearest 1,000 is 1,000. Now, use what you know about place value to explain your answer. Well, we could simply say that 981 is what? Is closer to, what is it closer to? 1,000 than it is to 0. And there are plenty of other explanations there. You could say that 900s, that 100 more would be 1,000. You could look at, well, it's 900s and 8 tens, so just less than 2 tens more would get us to 1,000. Many ways to explain this, but that works. So we read, we drew, we wrote, we're done. Moving on. All right, number 3, getting the homework time done here. Louise's family went on vacation to Disney World. Lucky them. Their vacation cost $5,990. Sophia's family went on vacation to Niagara Falls. So these are 2 different families now. Okay, 2 different families, 2 different vacations. Their vacation cost $4,720. Both families budgeted, so that's how much they planned to spend, about $5,000 for their vacation. Whose family stayed closer to the budget? So that's our question. Who was closer to 5,000? Round to the nearest 1,000. That's how we answer that question. Use what you know about place value to explain your answer. So we have to answer who stayed closer to the budget. How do we do that? By rounding both vacation costs to the nearest 1,000. And then we also have to explain our answer to show that we really understand what we're doing. We didn't just guess, because you got 2 choices here. I mean, you can just guess. That's not useful. All right, so now let's make our little vertical number line. But we are going to need 2 of them, are we not? Because we have 2 numbers we're rounding to the nearest 1,000. Let's do one at a time now. Okay, so let's start with Louise and her family going to Disney. How many thousands do we have? We have 5 thousands. What's 1,000 more? That's going to be the top point. Moving a little more quickly now because I'm assuming you're catching on here. What's 1,000 more? That's our upper point, 6,000. Our midpoint, we've been rounding to 1,000 on almost all of these, right? Or on all of them, yes. So what's our midpoint? It's 500, right? So 5,500. And where would Louise's vacation cost fall? Well, it's 5,900. Well, that's more than 5,500. In fact, if you do the math, you can probably see that she's just $10 away from that 6,000. Good thing they did not make that last stop at McDonald's for apple pies. They would have busted the $6,000 barrier there. So 5,990 is all the way up there. So we can now write how much this rounds to. 5,990 is about equal to 6,000. Now these are dollars. I'm just not putting the dollar signs here yet because we're just dealing with numbers. Okay, let's look at Sophia and her little family going to Niagara Falls. And I bet most of you are thinking, I'd much rather be in Louise's family. Thank you very much. So they spent $4,720. How many thousands are there? That's right, there are 4 thousands. That's our lower point on our vertical number line. What's 1,000 more than 4,000? 5,000 indeed. Our midpoint, well, half of 1,000 is still 500, my friends. So 4,500 is our midpoint. And now where would 4,720 fall? Well, is 4,700, let's just look at it to that point, is it more than 4,500 or less? 4,700 is more. In fact, it's almost halfway between these 2 points here. So 4,720 falls here. So now, and I'm going to use this space over here, I'll draw a little dividing line to keep parts of my answer clear. So 4,720 is about equal to, rounds to, that's right, 5,000. So who stayed closer to budget? Well, the budget was 5,000, and it's quite easy to see, and I'll label it. This is Sophia and her clan, and then we have Louise and her kin. So who stayed closer? Sophia. Note, you always have to actually say what your answer is. The question is, whose family stayed closer to the budget? You have to actually answer that question. Everything we just did does not answer the question. It doesn't. You actually have to say what your answer is. You have to you speak up and say, this is my answer. And we're going to do that in writing. We're going to say Sophia's family we have to make sure we're answering the actual question. Stayed closer. I'm using the phrasing of the question, make sure I answer it directly and clearly to the budget. And notice the spelling of budget, it's right there. You should spell it correctly. Kind of got a strange spelling, perhaps, in your mind. Sophia's family stayed closer to budget. Now we have to explain our answer. We are not yet done. So how do we know this? Okay, I know this. We can just say straight out. Because, well, how do we know it? Well, their cost rounds to 5,000, therefore it is, and whereas Louise's rounded to 6,000, so therefore their cost is closer to 5,000. In fact, even if they weren't under budget, which they clearly were, even if they were at 5,200, they were still closer because they round to 5,000s, whereas Louise's family rounds up to 6,000. Okay, because Sophia's cost rounds to, and here's where I'll use the dollar sign because now I'm talking about money, $5,000. And how about Louise? And Louise's to 6,000. I could add here if I'd wanted to when the budget was 5,000, but we obviously know that. There we go. Number 3 is done. Just have one more. Moving on, folks. Moving on. This question involves a time warp double reality. So Marcia's brother, number 4 here, wanted help with the first question on his homework. So we have a question about helping with homework, with math homework, on math homework, with helping you with your homework, on math homework, about a question about helping with math homework. Whoa, dude. Marsha's brother wanted help with the first question on his homework. The question asked the students to round 128,902 to the nearest thousand and then to explain the answer. Marsha's brother thought that the answer was 128,000. Was his answer correct? So there's our first question. Was his answer correct? We need to answer that. How do you know? And how do we explain how we know? We can use pictures, numbers, or words to explain. Well, let's start with a picture. Let's continue as we've done on every example today and draw our vertical number line. Now we're rounding this number here, 128,902, and we're rounding it to the nearest thousand. How many thousands? There are 128 thousands. 128,000. What is, not 100,000, not 10,000, what is 1,000 more than 128 thousands? 128, 129. Very good. 129,000. And again, as we've done on this entire homework, we've been rounding to the nearest thousand all the way through. So now you know you can find those midpoints lickety-splickety. What's halfway between? It's going to hit the 500, right? So 128,500. Now we place the number that Marsha's brother, who goes unnamed, we'll just refer to him as Marsha's brother, we place that number on this number line. So 128,9 compared to 128,5, it's more, right? So it's going to be almost all the way up here, right? 128,902. And just to make sure we're really understanding why I say it's almost all the way up there, here's what it would be. It says 128.5. Let's go back. 128.0, 128.1, 128.2, 128.3, 128.4. We already have 128.5, 128.6, 128.7, 128.8, 128,900, 129,000. That's why I say it's way up there, because if you were to mark out every 100 on this line, you could see exactly why 128,902 is practically all the way up there at 129,000. It's only 98 away. So now we could say, as Marsha's brother, who shall remain nameless, he who shall not be named, Marsha's brother, that this is what he should have written on his homework, that the number he's rounding to the nearest thousand should have been rounded to 129,000. So now we can answer our question, was his answer correct? Well, he had said 128,000. So, sorry, Marsha's brother, you're still a good person, you're still a nice guy, we love you, you're smart, but you're wrong. So Marsha's, really that's an S, Marsha's brother is wrong. We need to just go out and say that. We're not trying to hurt his feelings, even though he's just a fictional character. He's wrong. How do we know? We know because 128,902 is about equal to 129,000. See, we're using numbers and words to explain, not 128,000. And if we want to even go a little further, we could say because 900 places it above the midpoint on our what? What do we call that thing over there that we drew? On the vertical number line. And vertical simply means going up and down, right? Because you're used to using number lines that go horizontally, side to side. So there we go. Marcia's brother is wrong. 128,902 is about equal to 129,000, not 128,000, because 900 places it above the midpoint on the vertical number line, which our graphic here shows. And guess what? Homework time for you is over. Have a great day.